So my name's Sebastian, addict in recovery. Could say recovered. A lot to work on though still. I'm from Toronto, Canada, just outside of Toronto, Mississauga, born and raised. What brought me here, I had a very severe addiction issue. Not only that, I had a lot of underlying mental health problems, from depression, PTSD, just, going through these stages in life and not being myself, I'd say. I had an oxycodone addiction that started in the year of 2020. Prior to that, I was addicted to marijuana. I smoked my first joint actually when I was 7 years old. I smoked my first cigarette when I was 6. I was a lost child. I had a good childhood growing up, you could say, but I was just very lost, always looking for something, I guess someone, from that it progressed into other drugs. But I actually didn't really start experimenting with hardcore drugs until the age of 18. And yeah, I progressed with oxycodone. I remember I had a friend. What initially happened actually is I got into some legal trouble. I lived a stupid life, if I'm being honest. A life of crime, a life of, sin, I would say. And I got into some legal trouble and I had a friend and he told me about oxycodone and I said, oh, what's this? And he knew I was going through a lot. So he thought it was to help me. And he said, oh yeah, you take this, smoke some weed and you'll feel really good. And I remember at the time in Canada, we had the oxycodone. There was the instant release and there was the controlled release. So I was taking the controlled release ones, which would last 12 hours. And I remember when I took it, I fell in love with that. That was the thing that really took me, over the edge, because not only did it make me feel good, but it turned the reality into I thought is what I needed, and it gave me that sense of relief, sense of hope and power. I felt really powerful on that. I felt unstoppable on it. I would do things I would never do on that drug. And eventually I had no knowledge of withdrawal. I did not know what a withdrawal was towards a drug. And I remember I was taking it for 2 months straight. And then I tried to get clean, or I tried to stop taking it because it was starting to dig into my bank. It wasn't cheap where we're from. It was about $60 to $80 a pill. And I started taking, from 1 pill to 2 to 3. And so I tried to stop and I withdrawed severely. And I remember contacting my friend at the time, and I remember saying to him, I said, man, like, what's going on? I'm like, why am I feeling like this? I go, I don't feel good. So, oh, it's just withdrawal. It's fine. Just withdrawal. I go, I'm dying. You know what I mean? And yeah, and then I remember going sober. And from that, I tried to go sober. I withdrawed. And then just the cravings came on. And that eventually led to a 5-year constant using relapse, trying to get clean, relapse. But I had no true outlet. I had no true sense of help. I knew I had friends that were on Suboxone, that were on methadone, that were going into constant rehab because, again, I lived that certain lifestyle, that grimy lifestyle where you're involved in drugs and, that lifestyle, right? And I knew that the rehabs and all that wouldn't help me because I've seen it time and time over and over. So I was looking for something external that could help me. And I looked into Ibogaine through a friend actually that did take Ibogaine. And then I started doing my own research. I started watching videos about it, just trying to learn as much as I can. And I gave it a shot because my life got into a point where, I knew I was going to die. I knew that I remember telling myself, I'm like, yeah, I'll die when I'm 30. I'll either die or I'll go to jail for the rest of my life. And I remember that time in my life where I was like, okay with that, very accepting of that. So it got to a point where my family, my mother, my sisters and my family were very worried about me. And that's when I realized, I said, okay, I can't keep living like this because I'm miserable, so that's what started a lot. On the first day, I remember, first of all, I came completely out of my mind. That's for sure. A lot of us, we talked about it. We call it lighting our own cake before we arrived to rehab. So that's what I definitely did. I felt a lot of emotions, but I remember the one that I felt was curiosity, like what's going to happen to me? How am I going to be? And then, I still had that anger in me and I was very miserable, honestly, very depressed person to be around, like very not good. I remember speaking to the doctors now and hearing from everybody how I am now versus how I was. Complete night and day, like that's what the drugs do to you though. They make you a miserable person, that's for sure. Yeah, the Ibogaine experience, like mind blowing. That's what it was for me. Like it really took out the things that I needed to learn about myself. That's for sure. One thing that I could say from personal experience is the Ibogaine, you can't work on it. The medicine will work on you specific. So it will show you what you need to know. For me, it was the fear. For me, I didn't have a fear where I was scared of things. I had a fear that drove me to do things. I had a fear that got me out of my bed, that made me do things, life risk, take different risks in life that I would never normally do, and that fear drove me to a crazy dark place. And I had to conquer that on my own. So my experience at first, I was learning to deal with my fear. And I could tell you, like, I thought I was hearing the devil and I was hearing all this crazy stuff. And I thought that there was something really wrong with me. And I was like freaking out. And it was funny because the nurse actually walked up to me and she was like, "Are you okay?" And I remember thinking to myself, I go, "Okay, there's something very wrong." I go, "I'm going to tell the nurse that I need help, that there's something wrong with me." And she walks up to me and she goes, "Are you okay?" And I go, "Yeah, I'm fine." And I just remember being like, in my head, like, what? Like, why didn't I just say that, And then a second time she comes up because I'm freaking out at this point, and she walks up to me and she goes, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, okay, this time I'm going to tell her that there's something very, very wrong. And she comes up the second time, "Are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine." And I'm like, oh my days. I go, what's going on with me? So, and then right after that, I realized, I said, okay, well, the Ibogaine told me basically, you have to go through this on your own. Nobody is going to save you but yourself. So I understood that, and I understood that I had to feel this feeling and be vulnerable, and that being vulnerable is a good thing. And feeling these emotions is not necessarily a bad thing, because as an opiate user and opiate, cocaine user, whatever it was for me, multi-drug user, I was tend to numb that feeling, of pain, fear, agony, heartbreak, things like that, right? So yeah, and then it progressed into something beautiful. I started asking myself questions, and I used to see life very black and white, and it showed me, I would ask a question and I had 3 different answers to the question. And then it also, it showed me the pain that my family members felt, and that was something huge for me, because as an addict, you don't understand the harm that you're doing, not only to yourself, but to the loved ones in your life. And yeah, that crushed me, like I really felt how that felt. And I just remember saying, like, I'm sorry, I get it, I understand. And yeah, and then after that, after like all the trivia questions and stuff, I had some trauma issues that I was young. But yeah, it showed me, basically what it did was it showed me my trauma that happened to me from a completely different perspective. I'll tell you, it was like a daydream of where I was watering the hose and I saw it happen to 2 other people. And I just remember saying to myself, like, wow, like, poor kids, you poor children, you don't understand what's happening to you right now. And you don't understand the trauma that it's going to bring to you when you're older. And I just remember I opened my eyes and I just said, wow, I go, that was you, and that completely just changed my whole perspective on what happened, because I used to feel such a certain way about it. I had that guilt in me. I had that shame in me. I was so depressed about it. I would like do anything to block it out. And now it's like I just have such an understanding of it, and it's something beautiful. And how I feel the best ways. I feel still. I'm not overreacting. I'm not going crazy how I always would. And I'm just learning my emotions now. And I always say, like, I feel like a newborn baby, because I'm still learning, and life is always a journey for me, and I'm learning how to love. I'm learning how to be upset, how to handle those emotions, how to be afraid, how to, being okay with those emotions and sitting with them. But yeah, I would definitely say I'm learning, and I feel really good though. Like, the future's bright. I was actually saying earlier today that, and for the first time in a long time, I felt the presence of myself, and I felt my life, being in the moment, right? And that was like, I just remember thinking to myself, like, wow, like, this is going to keep getting better and better, so truly amazing. I know it's hard for a lot of people. Like, as an addict, you're very hopeless. You almost think that you're going to set that stone for yourself. One thing about me is I was like that too, but I always believed in God. I had that good side to me as well. And I always remember telling myself and hearing my soul cry. That's one thing that I learned as well, is hearing my soul cry. I remember telling myself, one day, like, this won't last forever, So what I would tell somebody is just remember that this doesn't last forever, nothing lasts forever. There is hope in life. Whether you believe it or not, I can promise you there is hope. The grass is greener on the other side. I'm somebody that could testify and say that, it does happen. But yeah, don't give up. That's the main thing. Keep fighting. The day that you give up is the day that you lay your own bed. Never give up. You might fall 1,000 times, keep getting up. I don't care how weak you feel. That's what's important, is to always keep the fight going. Beyond, wow, beyond, what is beyond? Wow. I think it's a message to the soul. I always said the people here, they're like messengers. You know what I mean? It's beyond. What is beyond? Beyond is for the soul. That's what beyond is. Beyond is something truly for the soul. It's almost a form of reincarnation into the true self. It's something that's beyond, you would say, seriously. And I'm not being, no pun intended. Yeah, it's life changing, like it's one thing that you realize is like the genuineness over here. It's not, it's not just something that it's like, oh, here, take this drug, like the regular pharmacies are, or the regular doctors are back home. Oh, here, take this drug, and we're gonna, you're gonna be on it for the rest of your life, and it's a treatment. I would call this a cure. You know what I mean? It's not something, don't get me wrong, you have to put the work in yourself. It's not just a miracle drug at the end of the day where you're gonna take it and boom, that's it. No, you have to integrate, you have to do a lot of things. Like me, myself, I've been doing a lot of things that I've never done before. But thanks to Beond, thanks to the Ibogaine, it's opened my mindset, it's opened my heart, and it's given me new opportunities to, again, explore myself, who I am, what I am, and the things that I'm doing in my life, So it's truly something that's, just like, again, mind blowing. Just, you almost have to experience it for yourself. I could only tell you so much. The way that I would explain Ibogaine, it opens you up in the way that you need to be. For instance, myself, I was a very closed person. I had tunnel vision. I saw the world black and white. And honestly, I was just a miserable person. And what Ibogaine did to me is it opened me up. It really gives you a different perspective and outlook on your life. One thing with my Ibogaine experience was when I took the Ibogaine, I realized how my mindset was so corrupted and how I brought that onto my own self, due to everything that I was doing in my life, from something as little to what I did when I first woke up, right? So Ibogaine gives you that reset, I would say, of your mindset, and it gives you that really deep understanding because it shows you everything that you need to know, right? So it's a surreal experience, a beautiful one, honestly, such a beautiful one. I remember when I finished, like I'm old school, like I don't really show my emotions, but for the first time when I finished the Ibogaine, I cried like a little baby. I cried, and the days on, I kept crying, and I was learning that that's okay. Like, it's good to cry. It's good to be sad. It's good to be happy because, when you're sad and you cry, you learn the other ones to be happy and joyful, right? So I'd say that's what Ibogaine is.